welcome to Adventures in Alchemy, a podcast filled with witchy tips and true stories to inspire your magical life. I am Michelle Martin Dobbins, the creator of Daily Alchemy and the Adventures in Alchemy podcast. This podcast is supported by the Daily Alchemy Premium Members Lab. I don't run a Patreon, so I keep membership at a very economical $11.11 a month. For that, you not only help sponsor this podcast, but you will receive access to 14 alchemy courses, and we add a new course each quarter, access to Reiki Level 1, 2, and Master's training and distance attunements, plus a library of audio distance Reiki healings, monthly alchemical experiments, PDFs of all my books and planners, and 15% off of everything else I sell. Also, there's a members-only Facebook group, so we can chat amongst ourselves in a private community. So when you join, I do ask that you commit to 3 months, since you are able to access and download all of the content immediately. It's $33.33 for the first 3 months, and then $11.11 every month after. I am so grateful to all the premium members who support my work, and I'd love to have you as a premium member too. If you're not already one, you can go to DAPM Lab, that stands for Daily Alchemy Premium Members Lab, dapmlab.com to check it out, or there'll be a link in the show notes. Now, on with the show, and may it be a blessing to all who listen. Okay, guys, so this week I just kind of want to riff a little bit with you and share some of my thoughts about the right-hand path versus the left-hand path versus fate and creating your own destiny. And I don't think I have any clear answers, just my thoughts. So if you're listening and you have thoughts on this, I'd love to hear more about it, because it's just one of those things that I ponder a lot. So I did do an episode on this before, I believe, and I talked a little bit more about like some people's definitions of right-hand path versus left-hand path. And I'm not going to go into all of that deeply again. I'll try to find that one and put it in the show notes. I think it might just be called right-hand path versus left-hand path, and share that with you. But I'm definitely not an expert on any scholarly definitions and like where that all came from. I'm just kind of going on like general assumptions here, which, assumptions, we all know what those are, right? But a lot of people, their general definition and thought is like right-hand path, good, left-hand path, evil. And that's not what I think is the case. To me, right-hand path is more a path of surrender, more a path of stepping back, an allowing path, a receiving path, a yin path, right? More feminine, more receiving. And a left-hand path is more creating your own way, more masculine, more yang. Am I getting those backwards? I feel like I'm getting those backwards. Yin and yang. Anyway, so more masculine, more like forceful, more creative. And here's my thoughts on that, is that you wouldn't want to be one or the other. And like a lot of people may really disagree with me. And like I said, that might just be because of the definitions, but I've just noticed, like the symbology in a lot of occult things, like even, and I'm probably going to say it wrong, like the Cadius, the symbol with the post and the snakes going around it. I actually have one tattooed on my back, so I should know how to pronounce it. But, it's one of those things you don't say out loud very often. Anyway, it's like one snake's going over to one side of the pole, and then it's like a weaving back and forth. And I kind of feel like that's what we have to do. Like we have to do our own creative work, and we have to do our surrendering work, which is actually kind of like the podcast where Carolyn Elliott was on, and she talks a lot about solve and coagula, solve being the more dissolving force, right? Letting go, cleansing, clearing out the things, the beliefs and things that we don't need. And then coagula, the creation of the new. And that's a very big facet of alchemy of all kinds. So, and in fact, to me, the 7 steps of alchemy kind of go back and forth too from that. And I'm hoping to do a class on that soon, but I'm still working it all out in my brain. So, going back and forth, I think that we would start with a certain level of surrender and then go to creation, right? So, start with right hand path and then left hand path and then back to some more right hand, left path and left hand path. And so we're going up. We're kind of like going back and forth around the middle way, as it were, which to me makes so much sense because we deal with so much paradox, right? Like we have to see something to believe it. And also, you don't have to believe it for it to work. These things don't seem like they make sense, right? And even like with the right hand and the left hand path, with right hand letting go and surrendering, one of my favorite examples of that would be Michael Singer. And he wrote an excellent book. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's called The Surrender Experiment. And he got really into meditation. And so he surrendered a lot of things, right? He like meditated and kind of then did what came up for him, which sometimes works really well for me too, but I am nowhere near his level. But then sometimes I would look at some of his choices in the book and kind of really wonder, like, he went to go visit his ex-wife and she lived on like a commune or type thing maybe, or like an ashram, I think. And he went there and he was like, oh, wow, she's there. And I don't actually know if he came to see her, but when he came in contact with her, instead of like having a conversation with her, he was like, I need to go meditate. And he meditated and then he left basically. And I haven't listened to this for a while, so maybe a little bit off. I know he did have some conversation with her, but a lot of his choices to me, I don't know. It's like that thing of like not making a choice becomes a choice and just like following through. But things came to him of what he should do step by step by step. And then he created this business that did medical billing. And then they got like raided by the government and all these crazy things happened to him. Some people would judge as good. Some people would judge as bad, maybe. And I do like the fact that he was just very sticking with surrendering everything, the good, the bad, which I think is a beautiful thing, especially when it's something that you can't control, right? Like the serenity prayer, but the serenity prayer is, and I don't have it memorized in my mind, but basically, it's like, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and to change the things you can. And that's totally off. But so, I feel like that's actually just a way to say what I'm trying to say here, which is that our goal is not really to choose whether we want to follow the right hand path or the left hand path. It's not whether we want to surrender or to create, but that we need to do both. And the trick is not which one, it's like which one next. What is the right choice in this moment? What is the right action in this moment? Is it right for us to act, or is it right for us to surrender action? And I think that's one of the big paradoxes of life, is that we need to do both. We can't just follow the right hand path and always be yielding and always be that more receptive, feminine side of ourselves, that sometimes we have to be that more masculine, active, creative side of ourselves. And that's just, I'm not talking about really gender. I'm just talking about those classifications of different essences, which we all have the masculine and the feminine inside of us. We all have varying degrees of it. And I think balance is great for all of us as much as possible. So yeah, I've been reading another book called The Power of Kabbalah. And I'm not a Kabbalist. I don't know if that's what you call a person who practices Kabbalah, but I've been interested in learning more about it. And I hope that I can explain what they talk about in the book and how it made me think about this too, which is it states that we as creation, we as humans were created to be the receiver from God, that we would have desires and we would receive our desires. But in learning and having this knowledge of the fact that someone else was providing our desires, that our greatest desire is to fulfill our own desires. And so that would be more of that masculine, that inside, that left-hand path that most of us, dare I say, all of us to a certain degree, have that desire to create our own path and forge our own path. And sometimes there are things that are totally out of our control. And I think sometimes this is where the law of attraction goes wonky for me, because I've definitely been able to attract into my life things that I've visualized, things that I've scripted about, things that I've prayer journaled, things that I've done all those classic things for. But then other things I haven't. And law of attraction might say that I just don't have the proper vibration, right? I'm vibrating something and we're not in alignment. So the like is not attracting like. And I'm sure that could be the case. And also, I find that sometimes there are things that may not be right for me to manifest. And also, sometimes I have to go back and do that salve work, that releasing, dissolving work of other stuff that is standing in the way of it. And no amount of positive affirmations and visualizations will help bring that into my life until I clear out those beliefs and can actually accept it and be the person who has that, which sounds very much like what I'm talking about like attracting like. So there's so much paradox with this. And as I said, I don't know that I necessarily have a great answer. It's just something that I ponder a lot. And that's kind of the point, the skill that I'm working on, the skill set that I'm working on is coming to that point in life of deciding, is this a time for me to surrender, or is this a time for me to push through and create what I want? I know I've kind of been recently working on bringing something into my life, and I sat recently doing work with a deity that I work with, and I was kind of in prayer and communion about creating this thing that I want in my life. And I'm not a person who sees visions. I'm not a person that sees things very much. More things I will hear, or the most I will feel. But I heard this clear voice at this time that said, that's not your fate. And out of just from me, and it was it wasn't even me, but it was me, just said, I create my own fate. And then I kind of felt like the deity I was working with was just kind of stunned. What? You create your own fate? Oh, that's not you. That's not who you are. But I think in some cases we can decide that we choose our own fate. And in some cases we can't. Now, I happen to believe in this particular situation that I can. Let's see if I'm proven right or wrong. Maybe eventually I will share. Right now, it's under that pillar of the witch's pyramid of keeping silent. Not fully silent, because I am talking about this thing that happened, but it has just kind of followed me around. Do I create my own fate? I said I did without thinking in that moment. But I know that there are many times where we don't consciously get to create our own fate. And maybe we do always create it. And then there's just that conscious part of us and that unconscious part of us, that part of us that is physically manifest, and then that higher self of us that we have a real hard time knowing and even feeling familiar with from this physical vantage viewpoint that we're in right now, right? And I guess that's what some would call our higher self. Some would call it holy guardian angel. Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking that probably on a certain level, we create everything. And I'm trying to think of who it was. Someone who was talking about like everything is happening inside your mind. You just have no idea how large your mind is. So to try to take this back to a practical place, because I've just been sharing my thoughts here with you, and I do want to give you something practical. So my thought on this is I'm trying to, when I'm writing in my journal and when I'm looking at like, what is my right action? Because that's kind of my guiding core question that I've been working with for a while now. Like, what's the next right action for me? And so for me, I'm kind of as I'm asking that, I'm thinking a lot about, is the next right action surrender or is it creation? And I don't know that those are, well, I guess in a way they're opposites, surrender and creation. That's just what kind of pops up to me. It's not that you can't create in surrender, I suppose, but it's more of a receiving mode. And for me, I think we do the creation work and then we do the receiving work next, right? We do what we can. We do what we're called to, what we're inspired to. We take those right actions. And then there comes a time to receive from the work that we've put in. I guess it's kind of like reaping and sowing when we're planting our garden as well. Like, first we put the seeds in and we tend to it and we tend to it and we tend to it. And then we get to receive the fruit of our labors. And then we have to tend again, right? So it's not like, I think that's where I get, and I understand that a lot of people have different definitions for right hand and left hand path than I do, but how you could always stay on one of those, because to me, it definitely is a weaving in and out of what is the right choice, because you can't always choose to sit there and pick the fruit off the vine, right? Eventually, there has to be a new creative thing. You have to plant a new plant, or you have to, do the work. And then I guess when you look at the Kabbalah book, and they were talking about how humans cannot be satisfied and fulfilled unless we fulfill some of our own needs and aims. And to me, that makes sense, because if we came somewhere and all of a sudden we have everything we want handed to us, it's just really boring for us, right? Like, if you constantly just had to walk outside and all of your fruit was on the tree and you never had to tend the tree and you never had to plant a tree and you never had to do anything other than just receive. Receiving is wonderful and beautiful and definitely a nice part of being a human being, but creating for others and for yourself is just as lovely, just as beautiful, just actually, I think in some ways, even more fulfilling. And so we definitely want to do that for ourselves and for others too, because I've found this really interesting how a lot of us, we find it really easy to give to others, to create for each other, for others, to just give in any way to other people. But we don't want to receive. We don't want to receive gifts or help or anything like that. But the thing is, when we don't receive from others, we steal from them the joy of giving. And, like giving and helping somebody it's such a good, fulfilling feeling that you don't want to deprive others of that feeling. And of course, we want to have that feeling for ourselves. Yeah, I don't know. I know that I have talked for 20 minutes and I don't know that I've given you a whole lot of practical advice, but I hope that I have at least got your mind pondering on what your steps are, and like in your own spiritual practice, in your own magical practice, how much do you surrender and how much do you create? How much do you stick to that right hand path? How much do you stick to that left hand path? And Do you think you need more balance? Or, is it perfect the way it is? What's your next right action? So yeah, that's what I would do. And that's what I am doing as I journal and as I go through my days. I'm looking at what is needed now. Is more action needed, or is more receiving needed? And, it goes back and forth, even during the course of one day, right? So thank you for tuning into this. And my voice lately for the past several weeks has just gone in and out every time I start to talk. So I'm assuming it's some type of allergy thing. So I apologize for that and hope that it's going to be on the mend, because I do have some interviews coming up. So next week's episode will be an interview, and have a few more. So if you would like to be interviewed and you would like to share your thoughts on magic, your daily practice, your experiences, your magical experiences, I would love to have more of a inspiration from other people's practices so that people can glean from it different ideas of how they might want to create their own magical daily practice. So if you're that person, please shoot me an email or connect with me on social media. I would love to interview and have you be part of this podcast. And beyond that, have a magical day, and let's go out and be change-making descendants, future exalted ancestors, and live magically in the now. And I'll talk to you next time.